The alien world of Valora was unlike any Earth had ever seen. The sky was an angry shade of red, filled with thick clouds that seemed to never move. The air was dry, filled with the smell of dust and smoke. Captain Ethan Clark, a human soldier, crouched behind a rocky outcrop, his heart pounding in his chest. His armor was scratched, his weapon heavy in his hand, and his mind was racing. His squad was scattered across the battlefield, fighting to protect the last stronghold against a relentless alien invasion. For weeks, the aliens had been advancing, pushing the humans back at every turn. The ground shook with the sound of blasts and explosions. Ethan had seen many battles, but this one was different. The aliens they were fighting now were stronger, smarter, and more brutal than anything they had faced before. Ethan had been at the front line since the beginning of the war, lending his squad into every battle with courage. But now, as he knelt, behind the rock, blood dripping from his wounds, he knew that this battle might be his last. The pain in his side was unbearable, and his vision was starting to blur. His heart raced, not just from fear, but from the realization that he might not make it out of this one alive. "Ethan," a voice cried out over the comms. It was Lieutenant Hannah, one of his closest friends and fellow soldiers. We need you here." "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan whispered to himself, gripping his side to stop the bleeding. I could barely hear her over the sounds of war around him. His thoughts began to fade, and the world seemed to grow. Darker as the battle raged on, Ethan's body began to betray him. His fingers lost their grip on his weapon, and the pain was almost too much to bear. The blood loss was too much, and his head sank low. He couldn't keep his eyes open any longer. He felt his consciousness slipping away, as if he was being pulled into a deep, cold darkness. Just as he thought he might pass out, a figure appeared before him. Ethan barely managed to lift his head, his blurry eyes focusing on the strange figure that stood in front of him. She was tall, with skin as pale as moonlight. Her eyes glowed a deep red, and her long dark hair flowed like a river in the wind. She wore strange armor that shimmered with an eerie light. Ethan's vision wavered, and he blinked, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Was she an enemy? A hallucination? His mind was foggy, and his body was too weak to move. The woman stepped closer, kneeling beside him. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, and for a moment, everything went still. The chaos of the battlefield faded away, and all that was left was the woman's presence. There was something ancient and powerful about her. She didn't speak at first, but her gaze seemed to pierce through him, as though she could see into his very soul. "You are close to death, Ethan Clark," she said, her voice soft but filled with authority. "But I will not let you die here." Ethan's throat was dry, and he could barely speak. Who are you?" he rasped. "I am Lyra," she replied, her eyes never leaving his face. "I have watched over you, and I know that you have more to do in this world than simply die here. You will not die today, Captain Clark." He tried to lift his hand, but his strength was gone. His fingers twitched, reaching for her, but the effort was futile. What do you want from me?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed her hand over his wound, her fingers glowing faintly. Ethan felt a strange warmth, like a fire had started to burn inside him. But it wasn't a normal kind of warmth. It was intense, otherworldly. His pain seemed to melt away, and his breathing became easier. "I offer you a choice, Ethan Clark," Lyra said. "You can die here, a hero, or you can live. I will make you one of my own. You will not age, you will not die, but you will be bound to me forever." The offer hung in the air like a heavy weight. Ethan didn't fully understand what she meant. He had heard stories of creatures that could grant immortality, but he had always thought they were just myths. Yet here she was, offering him the impossible. I don't want to die," Ethan said weakly, his words barely a whisper. "But what does it mean? What will happen to me?" Lyra's gaze softened, and she lowered her hand from his chest. "You will be changed. You will become like me, one of my kind. Will never know death again, but you will carry the weight of this gift forever. The immortality I offer comes with a price." Ethan tried to process her words. He had always been the one to fight for survival, to push through the impossible. But this This was beyond anything he could have imagined. He had always thought he would die as a soldier, just like the rest of his squad. Now this alien woman was offering him something more, something far beyond death. "I don't know," he muttered, closing his eyes. "I'm not sure I can make that decision." Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, and a soft smile touched her lips. "I have seen your future, Ethan Clarke. You will be stronger. You will be a warrior, unlike any other. But you must trust me. Do you trust me?" Ethan looked up at her. She was so different from anything he had ever known. Not anything he had ever encountered. But there was something in her gaze, something that made him feel like he wasn't alone anymore, like she truly cared for him, even though he was just a soldier in a galaxy full of enemies. "I trust you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Lyra nodded. Without another word, she placed her hand on his chest again, this time pressing it deeply into his skin. Ethan felt a jolt of energy shoot through his body, a searing heat that rushed to every part of him. His wounds healed instantly, and his body began to feel different, stronger. The pain was gone, replaced by an overwhelming surge of power. As the last of the darkness faded from his mind, Ethan's eyes opened wide. His vision was sharper, clearer than it had ever been before. The world around him seemed to come into focus in a way that was almost too perfect. He could hear the sounds of battle gunfire, explosions, the cries of his comrades, as though they were happening in slow motion, but he was no longer a part of it. He was something else now. Lyra stood over him, watching him with calm eyes. "You are reborn now, Ethan Clarke. Welcome to your new life." Ethan couldn't speak. He felt alive, in a way he had never felt before. And though the world around him was still full of chaos and war for the first time, he felt as if he had the power to face it. Ethan stood in the middle of the battlefield, his body pulsing with energy, his mind struggling to understand what had just happened. The pain that had once racked his body was gone, replaced by a strange new power that flowed through his veins. His hands were steady, his breath calm, and his thoughts clearer than they had ever been before. The blood from his wounds had vanished as if it had never existed, leaving him whole, alive, and more than human. He looked down at himself. His armor was still dented and battered, but he felt no discomfort, no weight in his chest. He was different now, stronger. The battle around him continued, but it felt distant, as if the world had slowed down and he could see it all in sharp detail. The alien woman Lyra stood beside him, watching him with those piercing red eyes. She had not moved, not flinched, and her calm demeanor made it seem as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. She had given him a gift that seemed impossible, yet here he was, feeling more alive than ever. "What is this?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse but clear. He couldn't believe what had just happened. "Why did you do this?" "Why me?" Lyra's gaze softened slightly, though her expression remained unreadable. "Because you are more than just a soldier. Ethan, I saw something in UA's strength, a will to survive, even when everything around you is falling apart. You deserved to live." "I don't understand," Ethan said, shaking his head. "Can this be real? How am I still alive? What did you do to me?" "You are now one of my kind," Lyra explained. "A vampire, as my people call us. We are ancient beings, born from a different world. We do not age, we do not die. Our strength is unmatched, our senses heightened, and our blood gives us power beyond imagination." Ethan took a step back, trying to process her words. "You made me one of you? But I'm human. I don't belong in your world." "Do now," Lyra replied, her voice calm and steady. "This is not a curse, Ethan. It is a gift. We're no longer bound by the limits of mortality. You are immortal." Ethan's mind raced. He had heard stories, of course. Stories about vampires, myths, fables, things from ancient Earth, but none of those stories could have prepared him for the reality of standing here, talking to one of them and feeling the power coursing through his body. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was something more. "Why me?" Ethan repeated, his voice a little more forceful. "Why did you choose me? Why not someone else?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, as though considering his question carefully. "Because you were on the brink of death, yet you still fought. You didn't give up, even when all seemed lost. That is the mark of someone who can withstand the burden of immortality. Ethan looked away, feeling a heavy weight on his chest. But what does it mean? What do I have to do now?
Right.
A soldier I don't know anything about being like this. I don't know how to live forever. You will learn, Lyra said simply. But you must understand that immortality is not without its challenges. You will watch those you care about grow old and die. You will witness the passage of time in ways that no human ever could. World will change, and you will remain the same. It is a lonely existence. Ethan swallowed hard, the reality of her words sinking in. He had always believed that death was the ultimate end, that it was the final thing that would give meaning to life. But now he was faced with the prospect of living forever, of outlasting everything he had ever known. I don't know if I can handle that, he muttered, looking at the battlefield around him. His comrades were still fighting, struggling to hold their ground against the alien forces. Ethan had always fought alongside them, sharing their struggles and their pain. But now he was something else, something apart from them. You don't have to handle it alone, Lyra said, her voice gentle but firm. I am here. You have me, Ethan, and there are others like us, scattered across the universe. We do not seek to be gods, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Ethan turned to look at her, his thoughts racing. And what do you want from me? Why did you choose to save me? Why not leave me to die like the others? Lyra's red eyes locked onto his. I did not choose you because of your race or your position in life. I chose you because you have the strength to endure. You are different, Ethan. You may not understand it yet, but your journey is far from over. Ethan felt a sudden wave of anger rise within him. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be immortal. I didn't ask to be changed into something. I don't even understand. His voice was loud, shaking with frustration. Lyra stepped forward, her expression unchanging. You may not have asked for it, but you have been given a chance. Not everyone is offered such a gift. And now, you must decide how to use it. For a moment, the two of them stood there, the chaos of the battle surrounding them. The world seemed to pause as if it was holding its breath. Ethan didn't know what to say. His emotions were a whirlwind, anger, confusion, fear, and something else, something he couldn't quite name. I don't know if I can do this, he said, his voice quieter now. I don't know if I can live forever, watch everyone I love die and still keep fighting. You will learn, Lyra said softly. You will learn that immortality is not about surviving forever. It is about finding meaning in the time you have, about making a difference. Ethan looked at her, searching her face for something he could hold on to, for something that would make sense of this new life he had been given. And you. You'll help me? Lyra nodded. I will help you, Ethan. You are not alone in this. Ethan's world had shifted completely. What had started as a routine mission, a fight for survival, had turned into something he could barely comprehend. He had always known that the universe was vast, full of dangers and strange, unknown beings, but never had he imagined that he would become part of that mystery. The battle was over, but a new fight had only just begun. It was a battle for his very identity. As the days passed, Ethan found himself struggling to accept the change that had been forced upon him. The power in his veins, the strength in his muscles, and the clarity in his mind were all overwhelming. At first he thought it was a blessing. He was stronger than ever before, able to heal from wounds in an instant, able to sense things that others could not. He could hear the faintest sounds, feel the slightest vibrations in the air. The world seemed to open up in ways he had never imagined. But with every passing hour, Ethan realized that this new life was not without its burdens. Immortality was not a gift without a price. At night, when the rest of the soldiers slept, Ethan would sit alone, his thoughts consumed by the weight of his immortality. He could see the others, his friends, lying peacefully under the stars, unaware of the strange twist of fate that had set him apart from them. Would he still fight alongside them? Or would he watch as they grew older while he remained unchanged? Lyra, who had become both his mentor and his guide, noticed the distance that had begun to grow between Ethan and the others. She had given him the gift of immortality. But she knew that the hardest part was still ahead for him, the struggle to accept his new reality. One evening, after the camp had settled for the night, Lyra approached Ethan as he stood looking out at the dark horizon. The stars above were like distant beacons, shining far away. Just like the life Ethan had left behind. "You are troubled," Lyra said softly, standing beside him. Ethan didn't look at her. "I don't know how to do this. To live forever and watch everyone else around me die doesn't feel right." Lyra studied him quietly for a moment. "It is natural to feel that way. But immortality is not about never-ending life. It is about what you do with the time you have. You have been given a gift, but it is not without its purpose." "What purpose?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "I'm just a soldier. I never asked for this. I don't want to live without the people I care about." Lyra's eyes softened. "You will find others who share your path, others like you. You will not be alone. But you must learn to carry your new life with grace. The world needs people like you, people who can fight for what is right, even when everything around them is changing." Ethan was silent, staring at the stars above. He wasn't sure he believed her. What good was immortality if he had to watch everyone around him grow old and die? How could he keep fighting for a cause when he was no longer part of the same world as the others? The next day, after a short rest, the sound of gunfire echoed through the air. Ethan's heart raced, his instincts kicking in as he snapped back into soldier mode. The peace they had fought so hard to gain was slipping away, and the enemy was not far behind. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the rising tension in the air as the soldiers prepared for battle. Ethan moved swiftly, joining the others as they rallied together, ready to face the oncoming threat. But this time, he was different. He could sense every movement of the enemy, every shift in the ground beneath his feet. His senses were sharper, more alive than ever before. As they took their positions, Ethan's thoughts were clearer than ever. He was no longer just a soldier. He was something more, a protector, an immortal force in a world that needed him. But it was not just his strength that set him apart now. It was his purpose. And slowly, very slowly, he began to understand what that purpose might be. The enemy came charging forward, but Ethan was ready. He moved faster than he had ever thought possible, his body reacting without hesitation. He struck down the first soldier with ease, his movements precise and controlled. The others followed his lead, and together they fought back with a newfound intensity. Ethan's strength was unmatched, but it wasn't just his power that made him effective. It was the clarity of his mind, the determination in his heart. For the first time since his transformation, Ethan felt truly alive, truly connected to the battle around him. The fight was brutal, but they were victorious. As the last of the enemy forces retreated, Ethan stood among his comrades, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with the effort. He felt an overwhelming sense of pride and accomplishment. This was what he was meant to do. He was no longer just a soldier fighting for survival. He was fighting for something greater later. As the sun began to set and the camp settled for the night, Ethan found himself sitting by the fire, his thoughts still swirling. The battle had been won, but the true battle, the one for his soul. For his place in this new life was far from over. Lyra approached him quietly, sitting beside him without saying a word. She knew what he was thinking. "You did well today," she said at last, her voice soft. Ethan nodded, still staring into the flames. "I feel like I've found my purpose, but I still don't know if I can live with this forever. I don't know how to keep going when I know I won't grow old, when I won't die." Lyra studied him for a moment before replying. "Immortality is not about avoiding death. It is about what you do with the time you have, no matter how long that may be. You can still live a full life, even if it is a life without the certainty of time. That is the true challenge." Ethan turned to face her. "And what if I'm not ready for that challenge?" Lyra smiled softly. "You will never be ready. That is the nature of immortality. But when you find your purpose, you will know. When that time comes, you will have everything you need to face it." Ethan looked at the stars once more. They seemed so far away, just like the life he had known. But now he understood something he hadn't before. Immortality wasn't about escaping death. It was about embracing life, no matter how long it lasted. And for the first time since he had been given this new existence, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Ethan stood at the edge of the battlefield, his eyes scanning the horizon. The recent battle had ended in their favor, but something inside him felt off. He had never been one to question his purpose as a soldier. His mission was always clear. But now, with this newfound immortality, everything seemed uncertain. For the first time, he wondered if he was still the same person he once was. Would he ever find peace? The wind blew softly across the camp, carrying the scent of burning wood and the distant sounds of soldiers talking. His comrades, the ones who had fought by his side, were laughing, celebrating their victory. But Ethan couldn't join them. His mind was too consumed with thoughts of his new existence, of the unending life that stretched out before him. "Captain, you coming?" Lieutenant Hannah called out, waving to him from the campfire. She was smiling, her face still smeared with dirt and blood from the fight. "We're celebrating tonight. You've earned it." Ethan looked at her, the woman who had been his closest friend for so long. She had no idea what had happened to him, what Lyra had done. He had kept it all to himself, afraid to tell her the truth. He didn't want her to look at him differently. "Not tonight," he replied, his voice flat. "I'm just going to rest." Hannah raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. She turned away, leaving him to his thoughts. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He missed the way things used to be. He missed being just a soldier, living and dying alongside his friends. But now he was something else, something that didn't belong. He was different, and it was hard to ignore the weight of that difference. That night, as the camp quieted down, Ethan lay in his tent, staring up at the canvas roof. The others were asleep, their breathing steady and calm. But for Ethan, sleep was elusive. How could he rest when he knew that, unlike them, he would never grow old, never feel the effects of time? Would he still be able to relate to them in the years to come? Would they grow old while he remained the same? He could already see the subtle signs, the way they joked about their future, their families, their dreams. He would never be able to experience that. His mind drifted to Lyra. She had warned him about the burden of immortality, but he hadn't fully understood it until now. She had told him that he would watch those he loved grow old and die, and that he would remain unchanged. But it wasn't just about watching others age. It was about the endless passage of time. It's a feeling of being stuck while the world moved forward without him. The next morning, Ethan woke early, his thoughts still heavy. The camp was all ready, buzzing with activity as soldiers prepared for their next mission. He tried to push his thoughts aside, but they lingered, tugging at his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing something important. Lyra had told him that he would find his purpose, that immortality was not about escaping death, but about embracing life. But what did that mean for him now? What was his purpose in this new life? "Captain," a voice broke through his thoughts. He looked up to see Hannah standing in front of him, holding a datapad. "We've got new orders. We're being sent to secure a new position on the east side of the camp. Are you ready?" Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure he was ready for anything anymore. He stood up, grabbing his gear, and followed Hannah toward the rest of the squad. As they walked, his mind wandered again. The soldiers around him laughed and joked, preparing for the mission ahead, but Ethan remained silent. They didn't know what was going on inside his head, didn't understand the weight he was carrying. The mission was straightforward, nothing they hadn't done 100 times before. They had to secure a position and hold it until reinforcements arrived. But as they marched through the dusty terrain, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking down a path that he wasn't sure he belonged on. As they reached the designated position, the familiar sound of weapons being readied filled the air. Ethan's instincts kicked in, and he fell into his role as a leader. His movements were precise, his mind focused. He was a soldier, and this was what he had trained for. But even as he gave orders, his thoughts kept drifting back to the same questions. What was the point of all this if it would never end? What would happen when his friends moved on, when they grew old and left him behind? Hours passed, and the mission was completed without incident. But even as they returned to camp, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was drifting further away from the people he had once considered family. He had saved their lives, fought alongside them, but he knew that they would never understand what he was going through. That evening, as the camp settled into the quiet of night, Ethan found himself alone again, sitting by a small fire. He stared into the flames, his mind heavy with the burden of his immortality. He had saved lives, and he had protected his friends, but at what cost? Would he always feel like an outsider in a world that was moving forward without him? Lyra's voice interrupted his thoughts, and he looked up to see her standing nearby. She had a way of appearing without warning, like a shadow that had always been there, waiting. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the fire. "I'm not sure I can keep doing this," he said quietly. "I don't know how to live like this." Lyra sat down beside him, her presence calm and steady. "You are not meant to do this alone, Ethan," she said softly. "Immortality is not meant to be a burden. You must learn to live with it, but you must also learn to live with others. Your strength comes from the bonds you form, not just from the power inside you." Ethan looked at her, her words sinking in. "But how? How can I keep going when everything around me is changing and I'm not?" Lyra gave him a knowing look. "It is not the world that changes, Ethan. It is the way you see it. You must find new purpose, new meaning in each day. It's the only way to survive." Ethan nodded slowly. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew that he couldn't keep running from his immortality. If he was going to survive in this new life, he would have to find a way to live with it, to accept the changes that came with it. As the night grew darker, Ethan felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could find his place in this new world. But for now, he would have to take it one day at a time. Ethan stood on the edge of the camp, his gaze fixed on the distant hills. The silence of the night was thick, and the usual sounds of the battlefield felt far away. For the past few days, everything had been calm. The enemy had not made any major moves, and the soldiers had begun to relax, believing they had pushed the invaders back. But Ethan knew that the calm was only temporary. The war was far from over. He felt the weight of his immortality pressing on him again. It had been weeks since he had been changed by Lyra's blood, but the feeling of being different, of being set apart from his comrades, never went away. He could still hear their laughter, see the way they interacted, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't truly belong with them anymore. He was no longer the man they knew. He was something else, something that would never age, never grow old. Well, they would. Lyra's words echoed in his mind. Immortality is not meant to be a burden. You must find new purpose, new meaning in. Each day, Ethan wasn't sure he had found that purpose yet. He was still searching, still trying to figure out how to live with what he had become. His thoughts were interrupted when a soldier rushed toward him, his face pale with urgency. "Captain Clark," the soldier called out, panting. "We've received new intel. The enemy is regrouping. They're planning something big. We need to move now." Ethan's heart raced. Despite the peace that had settled over the camp, he knew the war was not over. He turned toward the camp and quickly gathered his squad. "Prepare for immediate action," he ordered, his voice firm. "We need to move out, now." The soldiers, though still a little disoriented from the sudden orders, immediately sprang into action. Ethan felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. His mind, sharper than ever, assessed the situation quickly. They had been given little time to prepare, but he knew they had to be ready for anything as they made their way out of the camp and into the wilderness. Ethan could sense something was off. The air felt heavier, the silence oppressive. His senses, heightened by the change that had come with his immortality, told him that they were not alone. He could feel eyes watching them, waiting. But from where? The landscape around them seemed calm, almost too calm. "Keep your guard up," Ethan ordered his squad. "I have a bad feeling about this." The team moved forward cautiously, their weapons at the ready. As they moved deeper into the terrain, the uneasy silence remained, each step feeling more tense than the last. Ethan's instincts honed over. Years of combat told him something was coming, something dangerous. The first sign of trouble came suddenly. A sharp sound echoed through the air, followed by the unmistakable rush of movement. The enemy had found them. Ambush, Ethan shouted, diving to the ground. Take cover! The squad scrambled, taking up defensive positions behind rocks and trees. The enemy appeared from the shadows, emerging with terrifying speed and precision. Ethan could barely make out their shapes in the dim light, but he could hear their footsteps, their breathing, each of them moving in a coordinated, deadly pattern. They were not the same alien soldiers they had fought before. Advanced, more lethal. They wore black armor that blended into the night, and their movements were almost fluid, like shadows. Ethan's heart beat faster, but his mind remained clear. He moved swiftly, his body reacting almost instinctively. His immortality gave him an edge, but he knew that this fight would not be easy. These were no ordinary enemies. They were elite soldiers. Trained for situations like this, the battle began in an explosion of noise and chaos. Ethan's squad fought valiantly, but the enemies were relentless. Ethan moved with an unnatural speed, his enhanced senses allowing him to anticipate the enemy's every move. He fired his weapon with precision, taking down one of the attackers. With a single shot, but even as he fought, he knew that this was only the beginning. There were too many of them. The tide of the battle shifted when a larger, more imposing figure appeared in the distance. It was an alien, unlike any Ethan had seen before. Its size alone was enough to make the ground tremble as it moved toward them. It wore heavy armor that seemed to absorb the light, making it look like a living shadow. Its eyes glowed with a menacing red light, and its voice, when it spoke, was deep and guttural. "You think you can defeat us?" the alien growled, its voice booming in the night. "You are nothing but insects to us." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary enemy, it was a leader. Someone who commanded the others. "Fall back," Ethan shouted to his squad. "We need to regroup." But before they could retreat, the alien leader raised its hand, and the ground shook violently. Ethan barely had time to react before the earth beneath him cracked open, sending him sprawling. He tried to regain his footing, but the force of the shockwave threw him off balance. "Captain." Anna's voice broke through the chaos. She was struggling to stay on her feet, her face pale with fear. "What do we do? We can't win this." "Fight." Ethan looked around, his mind racing. They were outmatched. The enemy was too strong, and their numbers were overwhelming. But he couldn't let his squad fall. He couldn't let them die because of his failure to act. Then he remembered what Lyra had told him. "You are more than just a soldier. You have the power to protect, to make a difference." Ethan took a deep breath and looked at the alien leader. He could feel the power inside him, the strength that Lyra had given him. It was time to use it. He charged forward, moving faster than he had ever moved before. The enemy leader swung a massive weapon toward him, but Ethan dodged with ease, his body flowing like water. He closed the distance between them in an instant. His weapon aimed at the alien's exposed side. With a single strike, he brought the enemy leader to its knees. The other attackers hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Without their leader, they were disorganized, and Ethan's squad took advantage of the moment to fight back. The battle raged on. But slowly the tide began to turn in their favor. Ethan fought with everything he had, his immortality giving him an edge that no one could match. The enemy forces were pushed back, retreating into the darkness. As the last of the attackers fled, Ethan stood, breathing heavily, his heart still. Raced, but this time, it wasn't from It was from the thrill of victory. He had faced the enemy, and he had won. But even as he stood victorious, he knew that this was only the beginning. The enemy was far more dangerous than they had anticipated, and the war was far from over. Ethan stood alone at the edge of the camp, his eyes scanning the distant horizon. The air was cooler than it had been the night before, and the stars above seemed to shimmer brighter than usual. The battle had been won, but in his heart Ethan knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The war was far from over, and the challenges that awaited him were even greater than before. It had been several weeks since the ambush, and the fight where he had discovered just how different he had become. Lyra had told him that immortality was not a gift to be taken lightly. She had warned him about the burden of living forever, the weight of outlasting those he loved. And now, standing here, he felt that weight more than ever. "Captain Clark," a voice called out behind him, breaking his thoughts. He turned to see Lieutenant Hannah approaching, a concerned look on her face. "You've been quiet lately. Are you all right?" Ethan nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. Just thinking." "Thinking, huh?" Hannah said with a half-smile. "Well, if you ever want to talk, you know where to find me." Ethan gave a small nod of acknowledgement, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything more. He knew that no matter how close he was to his comrades, there were things they would never understand. The changes inside him, the way the world felt so different, and I couldn't know what it was like to be immortal, to watch time slip away while everyone else around him moved on. "Thanks, Hannah," he said quietly, his voice betraying the weight of his thoughts. She gave him a concerned glance but said nothing more. Instead, she turned to walk back to the others, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts once more. The days were becoming harder to navigate. Every moment felt heavy with the awareness that he would never grow old, never experience life the way his friends did, even the simple things. The passing of seasons, the growing of a family felt distant to him now. Would he ever truly find a place for himself in this world? Or was he doomed to watch from the sidelines, unable to be part of the life he had once known? That night, after the soldiers had settled into their tents and the campfire had burned, lo, Lyra came to him once again. Her presence was quiet, like the night itself, but Ethan could feel her watching him. She always seemed to know when he was struggling, when he needed her most. "You are troubled, Ethan," she said softly. Sitting down beside him, Ethan looked at her, his expression weary. "It's harder than I thought. I can fight, I can protect. But I can't escape what I am, what I've become." Lyra nodded, understanding in her gaze. "Immortality is not something that can be escaped, but it is also not a prison. It is a chance to do more, to become more. Learn to live with it, to accept it as part of who you are now." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration building inside him. "I don't know how. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this time. How can I keep going when everyone else will grow old and die, and I'll stay the same?" Lyra's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "You are not alone, Ethan. You may feel that way, but you are not. There are others like you, others who understand what it means to live forever. You will find them, and you will find your place in this new world. But you must let go of the fear of being alone. You are stronger than that." "I don't feel strong," Ethan muttered, his voice heavy. "I feel lost." Lyra studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "You are not lost, Ethan. You are simply learning to navigate a new path. And sometimes the hardest part of a new journey is finding the courage to take the first step." Ethan looked at her, searching her face for something that would make him feel like he wasn't alone in this. He didn't speak, but Lyra seemed to understand. She didn't push him further, just sat beside him in the silence of the night. Her presence a quiet comfort. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the weight on his chest ease, even if just a little. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know what the future held for him, or how he would ever find peace with what he had become. But for the moment, he knew he wasn't alone. And maybe for now, that was enough. The next morning, after a restless night, the soldiers began preparing for their next mission. The enemy had retreated for the time being, but they would be back. Ethan knew that much. He could feel it in his bones. As he walked toward the briefing area, Ethan's mind wandered back to Lyra's words. He had spent so much time focusing on the fear of what he had become that he hadn't stopped to think about what he could become. What if immortality wasn't a curse? What if it was an opportunity, a chance to make a real difference in a universe that was full of chaos and pain? As the briefing began, Ethan found his place at the front of the group. His eyes focused on the maps and the plans being laid out. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing. He would not let his immortality define him. He would define it. He would use the time he had been given to protect those he cared about, to fight for what was right. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to embrace this new life, not as a burden, but as a gift, as the soldiers gathered. their gear and prepared to move out, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fear and doubt that had clouded his mind began to fade. He was not just a soldier anymore. It was something more, something stronger, and he would face whatever challenges lay ahead, no matter how long it took.